Hello and welcome. I'm Elaine Canyon, sweetly writing happily ever after, one book at a time. And in this video, I've got tips and tricks for discovery writers. This is the last Preptober video I'm making for 2023. Next month, we start NaNoWriMo, which is super exciting. Instead of having weekly videos, what will happen is I will have weekly live streams. They'll be on Wednesdays. I will get all of them scheduled. They might be scheduled now. We'll see. But I will have them scheduled so that you can know. And if you want to come and co-work with me and have someone cheering you on in your NaNoWriMo goals, you're welcome to come and hang out here with me on YouTube Live. So let's jump in to this last tip that I have for discovery writers when it comes to NaNoWriMo. And it has to do with getting stuck. If you watched my AuthorTube writing conference class that I gave on thriving as a discovery writer, you'll remember that I had a few things in there about what to do when you got stuck. And one of the things that you need to understand when it comes to writer's block is that there's writer's block inside NaNoWriMo and there's writer's block outside NaNoWriMo, and you handle them differently. So writer's block outside NaNoWriMo, whatever you do, you are trying to make sure that how you get out of it is going to add to the story, is going to help build it forward, is not going to be a complete and total waste of writing time. And that's because your goal is to make sure that your draft is reasonably clean. You want to get through to the end of your draft or whatever scene you're writing, feeling like you have something usable and worth having. That is not the case in NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo is a completely different goal. So when you're drafting a story, the goal is at the end of the draft to have something you can actually work with and move ahead with. NaNoWriMo is different. NaNoWriMo is different because it is 50,000 words in 30 days or less. So everything and anything is fair game because you're going to get drafted to the end, and it doesn't matter whether or not you can use it. What matters is that it was words on the page that you could count. And sometimes that's going to be usable, and other times that's not. So I'm going to do another video where I dive a little bit deeper into writer's block as a discovery writer, ways to get out of it, ways to make sure that when you're getting out of it, it actually applies to the story you're writing and the feelings that you're getting as you're following your intuition, that sort of thing. This is different. This is how do I get 50,000 words in 30 days or less, and I've got writer's block on the story I'm writing. So there's two ways that I want to address here, and I'm addressing them because they're fast and because they're kind of fun. So the first way is you're going to need a dice. Now, that can be on your computer, because if you tell Google I need to roll a 6-sided dice, it'll roll a 6-sided dice. Or it can be super geeky like me, and you can actually have like a whole thing of dice, and you can have different sheets for each dice that you own. But let's go really super simple, because most people have, not as pretty as mine, but most people have a 6-sided dice. You're going to create a list, or you're going to find lists. You can find lists for story dice everywhere. Becca Simey has a whole bunch that she does, and I know there are other authors. As I think of them, I'll try and remember to put them in the description below. But those lists will tell you what to do next in your story. And even if it's not something that you're thinking will actually work in your story, guess what? The goal is the words. You don't even have to write it in the same document. You can write it in a separate document and just count it as your words. Now, what you can do in Preptober is find lists that look like they're going along with some of the things you already know about your story. So if you already know that you're going to be writing in fantasy, then you're going to find lists that are specific to fantasy. You're going to read through all of the possibilities. So some of them will have like 6 things on there, and they say one, like number 3 might be have your characters walk into a tavern and see where it goes. or get one of your characters injured. Have them go into a battle knowing that one of them is going to be injured. Things like that will spark your imagination and get you writing. And guess what? The goal in Nano is 50,000 words. The goal in Nano is not to have a finished, perfect document at the end of it. That's not what we're going for. We're going for 50,000 words in 30 days or less. So these story idea lists are great options to help make sure that you always have a place to get going. And using Preptober to find lists that are in the same vein as your story is usually really helpful. And I'm not going to lie to you, having the excuse to buy a bag full of pretty dice is also a nice thing. I highly recommend it. So that is something that you can do and doesn't cost really any money, because you can roll a dice in Google, and those story idea lists that I'm talking about, where they just give you a list of a whole bunch of story ideas and they're numbered, those are usually free too. You can find some that people ask you to like subscribe to their newsletter for, or they want you to pay for them, that sort of thing. They are there, but you don't have to do those. There are free ones. And you can also make your own. If you have a pretty good idea of things that you want your characters to be doing in this story, then by all means, make your own and go through and have that ready in October, so that in November, when you're writing and you get to the point where you look at the screen and you go, I have no idea what's going to happen next. Guess what? It's NaNoWriMo. It doesn't matter what happens next. What matters is that you get 50,000 words by the end of the month. And so open up a separate document and roll the dice and find out what situation you're putting your characters into and run with it. You might never use that scene, ever. That scene might be awful. You might get to the end of it and go, that will never see the light of day again. That's fine. All that matters is that that number of words counts towards NaNoWriMo's goal of 50,000 words, or whatever goal you've set. The next thing that I'm going to share with you is free on one hand and paid on the other. So there are story decks that are out there, and my favorite story decks are the Cthulhu creation cards. So I actually have the card decks. They were birthday presents for me. I love them. I think they're wonderful. I guess one was a Mother's Day present, one was a birthday present, but either way, they're fabulous. And what they do is they give you different elements to a story that you can bring in based on the cards. So there's things like texture, and it will give you a texture. So this one is velvet. So create a scenario where your characters need to interact with velvet. And then what else is in here? We've got a trait. So you can introduce a character trait. There's also relationships to bring in a new relationship. There's character cards to bring in a different character, habitat to give you a setting, elements to bring in different elements into your story. In the second deck, there's relationships, there's traits and textures, there's characters, there's habitat, and there's elements in that too. They also have an app. Now in the app, it's a lot cheaper to get all the cards. And I actually think you get a certain number of cards for free when you download the app. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But like these decks with the physical decks, they're at the time of this recording in October of 2023, they're $50 a deck. But in the app, you can get an entire deck, like a digital deck essentially inside of the app for, I think it was like $4 or $5 is what it was. If you buy the deck physically, you also get all of those cards in the app so that you don't have to double pay for them, which I thought was very nice. But the whole point of showing you these is because they're gorgeous and I love them and you should go look at them. But also because they're very helpful in getting your brain thinking and giving you new things. And like I said before with the story list and the dice, none of this has to stay. All of the words that you write in NaNoWriMo count towards NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo never said that you would have a perfectly polished, drafted 50,000 word novel at the end of it. NaNoWriMo never promised that, ever. They promised that you could write 50,000 words in a month. There is a big difference between that. Okay? I had to learn this. This is one of the things that Jessica Guernsey helped me understand. I had to learn that NaNoWriMo was not about a pretty draft. NaNoWriMo is about 50,000 words in 30 days or less. And when you can think about it that way, and when you can say to yourself, it doesn't matter as long as the word count goes up, then it changes how you draft. Because that's one of the biggest things with writer's block, especially for discovery writers, I've found as I've talked to a lot of them, is that the issue comes up, well, what if what I write can't actually be used in the story? And that's a valid feeling for a lot of writers to have, and it's usually a new writer feeling. But as you work out of that and work past that, you start to understand that there's always going to be something that has to be cut from your draft, especially a first draft. There's always something that it just doesn't sit right, or the story has grown past it, or what have you. There's usually a reason something has to be pulled out, even if it's just a conversation between two characters. That has to be pulled out sometimes. And it doesn't mean that the whole chapter was bad. It just means this conversation was irrelevant and didn't move the story forward. So using things like the Cthulhu cards and using things like the story list, those are helpful in NaNoWriMo because all they're meant to do is just get you writing. They just give you prompts and you move into it and write whatever happens, with the understanding that whatever you write doesn't have to go into your story. And you might write it and get to the end of it and go, wow, that was actually really cool. I want to work that in somehow. And that helps you, first of all, with your word count, and second of all, with keeping you from hitting writer's block again during NaNoWriMo. Other ideas that I have heard about that I haven't tried personally of people using to help them get out of writer's block in NaNoWriMo when they're in a pinch is they will open up the first book they see on their shelf and they open to a random page, or they'll have Google tell them what book number and what page, like they'll do a random number generator, things like that. And whatever line they assign themselves to read, they have to work that line into their story. That also can do something to just get more words down. The last thing you ever want in Nano is to sit down at a blank page and feel like you have nothing to write. That is where things go wrong very, very quickly. You want to sit down at that blank page, and if you can't immediately jump into your story and get going, then it's time to grab something to help you get going and not worry about whether or not it's going to be in the book or not, because that's not what we're here for. We're not doing NaNoWriMo because we want to have a pretty draft. We're doing NaNoWriMo because we want to write 50,000 words in 30 days or less. I will have a different video that is more about handling writer's block and still maintaining that pretty draft, because you're not worried about word count. You're worried about the work that you're creating being cohesive and being something that you can come back and edit a little bit more easily. That video will come later. But this video was specifically about just getting you out of writer's block so that the word count keeps going, because that's your goal in NaNoWriMo. Your goal is keep the word count going and keep the words as close to your daily minimum as possible. And if you can, to be going over your daily minimum, so that when you do have a day that your brain is just like, if I have to write one more word, I'm going to throw this computer through the roof. When you have those days, because oh my gosh, they come, you can turn to your community, you can seek support and solace there, and you can know that you're a little bit further ahead. And so if you need to take some time, you have that time to take. What is your Nano project this year? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps other authors find it. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on the live streams for NaNoWriMo or any of the videos I produce, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. I post videos on Wednesdays about discovery writing, cover design, and self-publishing on a shoestring budget. I hope to see you again soon.